Hi, and welcome back to another Conversations in Lacrosse History with the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. Today we're talking with Hall of Fame inductee, 2018 inductee, Gregg Gustafson from Brighton. So Gregg, I appreciate you sitting down and talk to us. And as you know, we're doing Hall of Fame interviews with everybody.
Yeah.
And I kind of do the easiest question. It's kind of, where did it all start? And I think for you it started in Southern California.
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California. Never saw the game of lacrosse growing up in Southern California. Ended up going to a small private college up in Oregon.
What's the name of the school?
Called Willamette University.
In Salem, right?
In Salem, correct. And first week of school, I see these guys in the quad, the center area of the university, playing catch with these sticks and ball, and I never seen it before. And I asked, well, what is that? And they said, well, it's lacrosse. And I go, well, let me have one of those. So we played catch for a little while. I said, this is kind of cool. Yeah, we have a lacrosse team here. And I go, what do you mean? This is like a sport? And they go, yeah. And so I went to a fall practice with these guys to check it out. Everybody gave me borrowed gear and borrowed stuff, and just loved it. The idea of being able to run, have contact, the speed of the game was just something that was super attractive to me. So I spent 4 years of college at a very small school learning and playing lacrosse, and our competition was, because it wasn't that big back there, you had Oregon State, Washington State, and some other small colleges. But most of it got started there because we had a bunch of prep kids that showed up. A few prep kids showed up, you get six prep kids.
East Coast prep kids?
Actually, they're West Coast prep kids.
Okay.
Yeah, West Coast prep kids show up, want to play some lacrosse. They have a team, and next thing you know, played 4 years of it, played a couple of club years after that, and just fell in love with the game.
We should point out, at this point, late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, good point. I graduated high school in 1978, so 1978 to 1982 was when I started playing the game.
So talk about the first stick you had and versus what we have today. I mean, that's an important fact in the discussion because you learned with the old style.
Yeah, so back in the day, you had a triangular shaped head with a mesh that you had to keep legal. No pinching, no nothing. And then if you had a wood shaft, if you were lucky, you had an aluminum shaft. Me being a college student, I would go and find aluminum shafts at someone at a game and throw them away because it was bent, and I'd take it back to my dorm room and straighten it out so I'd have a shaft. So yeah, it was
bent because you hit somebody.
Someone hit somebody, they didn't want it anymore, and I would go back and straighten it out so I could use it.
Right.
And as you know, back in the day, this was back when they had those old bucket helmets. The old bucket helmet and the gloves, and I think shoulder pads weren't like they were today. It was kind of like the under pads you wear when you played football, and that was it.
The helmets were made of leather, which was an interesting.
I evolved. I was a
Okay.
little bit after that. I had the plastic version of the leather helmet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was a goaltender when I was 14 in hockey before I ever wore a mask. And when the mask was basically just a simple plastic piece that went across my face. If you remember Jerry Cheevers from Boston,
Yep.
he used to take and make stitch marks on his mask where he would get cut. Well, obviously the mask was full because he got hit a lot.
Right.
We never thought about the injuries and the kind of things that happened in those days, but at least the plastic version was better than the lace-up leathers.
I'm not sure about that, but they were all they
weren't very good.
Yeah, there was no head contact back then. It was it was basically to protect your head. I remember at one point in time playing ball against Stanford, and this guy took a shot, and as a defenseman, I don't know why I did this, but I turned my head, so he hit me right in the ear hole. Ran off the field, sat down on the bench, and the coach asked me what I'm doing. I said, bell rang. I'm sitting here ready to go. And this is back before concussion protocols and stuff like that. So yeah, they weren't anything like they were today.
Big lumbersome players in some cases on the defense. You could hit from the shoulders down a lot more in those days than you can now.
Yeah, it was much more of a contact game. I think some of the traction to the game was a contact, but I think that the game now is a much more beautiful game because of the finesse that goes into it as opposed to just the brute strength. And it was a fun game then, fun game now. It's just evolved into more of the movement of the game as opposed to the contact of the game.
Now, your background was a business degree, economics degree?
Economics degree from Willamette University.
Which was what did you want to eventually do? I mean, I know you've been in financial management.
Eventually want to graduate.
Right.
Eventually want to get a job.
Sure.
But at that point in time in my life, that's about all there was. But no, I was in financial services for a period of time, and then moved from there from management and sales management and marketing management into being involved now with engineering software, specifically selling. And so being in sales, It gave me a chance to continue that competitive nature of playing sports. Plus, it also gave me some time. I had more control of my time, so I could better do things that I wanted to do, and somehow lacrosse became a part of that time as well.
Take us from Salem as a young man
Yeah.
through the corporate chain of moving back to how you ended up in Michigan.
So so corporate move, from Salem to Washington to Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio. Had our three sons in Columbus. From Columbus, Ohio, we moved to Michigan with the same corporation, and then the three sons, the wife, and I here in Michigan. When they were probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, saw these new sticks they had, aluminum shafts, and nice heads, and so I bought my kids lacrosse sticks, and started playing catch and ground balls with them, and bought a goal. Neighbors thought it was kind of a strange looking soccer goal. My wife was a soccer player in college, and so they learned to play soccer because of her, and lacrosse because of me, and they were probably the few lacrosse players in town, except for the kids that they invited over, that we had extra sticks to play lacrosse with.
The one question I've always wanted to ask coaches, and I do sometimes, if your wife had been an athlete versus your wife not being an athlete, and you happen to be a coach,
Yeah.
do you think it helps if the wife has had some athletic background, or is it really an individual thing?
So I can't answer that.
Okay.
Because I only have one wife for 35 years,
Right.
and she was an athlete. But I do think that most wives see the interaction between a father and his sons and the positive interaction with that, whether they're an athlete or not, and they have to sit there and say that's a good thing. But I don't know what a non-athletic wife would be like.
I have a non-athletic wife
Okay.
who becomes the team mother
Okay.
and becomes more competitive in a game situation
Right.
than if she was an athlete, she'd understand it. So when you get into discussions about things athletically, about a game situation,
Yeah.
with having no background,
Right.
sometimes they just don't understand it because they haven't been through the inside baseball stuff.
Correct.
So it's been fun,
Yeah.
but it's always been
Yeah,
that process.
but what's interesting is the way you describe that, right? As we just mentioned, a spouse that's an athlete or a spouse that's not, they still get involved because they see the impact it has on either your
Right.
sons or your community.
Right. So you end up back in Brighton.
Yep.
At some point. Before we move on to that, Columbus, Ohio is one of my favorite towns in the world.
It was a nice place.
Is it not a great place to live?
No, it's a great place. to live.
It's an unbelievable place.
It's a great place to live. As a matter of fact, that's where my sons actually got introduced to lacrosse. Thanks for backing me up a little bit. They had clinics for kids like first grade, I think it was even kindergarten. And so the first time my sons went to one, I think my eldest son at that point in time was in second grade, which is what, 7? And my youngest one, we cheated, and so he was 5. They put him in helmets and gloves and the whole 9 yards. That helmet, like this on his head, and they had clinics down there for kids at that age. And that was really when they got exposed to a corporate game. But
Right.
So when we came here, we kind of just played amongst ourselves.
And Ohio certainly was ahead of us in terms of the development of lacrosse
Yeah,
by a lot. And they're still not a
Yeah.
state association sport, which is I find they run the championship through the state.
Yeah.
But they're not they're much like the MSLA used to be.
Worthington Kilbourne's a school my kids would have gone to, and they're for a public school down there, they're pretty accomplished. But they've been playing for a while down there.
Well, Bill Wolford, was a Chicago machine guy,
Yeah.
and Teddy, his brother, was a coach at Arlington for years. Billy and I have been friends for a long time. So,
Yeah.
and in fact, he coaches at Kilbourne.
Yeah.
He's been there for years.
Yeah.
And there's a clinic coming up here. Billy's part of it, and the promotional picture for Bill was from literally 1950. So I wrote him a note. I said, "You got to start using a better picture because you're not 29 anymore."
Yeah, but he looks better than that picture.
He looks a lot better than the picture he did now.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the
Yeah.
part of the process. So kind of from a corporate standpoint, you kind of come back to Brighton,
Yep.
and it starts.
Yeah, so like I said, you're playing catch with your kids in the front yard, playing a little bit, and I had a buddy of mine named Charlie Esty who played ball at Ithaca College. His son Ben and I would come over to our house and we'd play, and so we decided, but this is probably around 2000, we decided we're going to do some summer clinics. We're going to do a summer clinic, 1 week long, 2 hours long, for a whole week. Our kids would come, invite your friends. I mean, maybe put a flyer up. We probably had 15, 20 kids show up. Each summer got bigger. I think we had 40 kids the last summer we did it. And we just had this summer program where we just bring other kids, introduce them to the game of lacrosse. And that was it. That's all we had in Brighton at that point in time. You just had summertime. And my eldest son, Zach, had commented to me that, hey, Dad, you mentioned we'd have a lacrosse team here in Brighton, while I was in middle school. And I said, Dad, don't worry, we'll do it. And he goes, well, Dad, I'm in 8th grade.
Great.
So he went out that winter and he played over at Total Soccer, where they had a program going on over there, really nice program going over there. But then that even gave him more of the bug to want to play. So this was probably January, around that time frame, when I said, okay, I got to see if I can't put a team together for my son. And so put out some flyers here in Brighton, put together a meeting over at one of the middle schools, got the old PowerPoint presentation put together, introduced people to the game of lacrosse, introduced them to how we're going to play, the teams we're going to play, and please sign up over here, write me a check, and here's your equipment stuff. And that's how I got started.
Wow. That takes a great commitment.
It does. It takes two commitments. One, it takes a commitment. I don't think I knew when I was getting into what commitment I was making.
Right.
The commitment to the truth to your son turned into a commitment to my community, which was both are equally important.
I know this is hindsight.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know, would you
Yeah.
have done the same work?
Absolutely.
Because the thing is, you don't know.
You don't know. Absolutely. I never would have. That was really a situation where I was led down that path by something greater than I am, because what it turned into, and the impact it's had on the community, the impact it's had on me, I just had no idea.
I asked Don Lutz, and I've said this story a couple of times, but I've asked Don Lutz, who was the father of lacrosse at L'Anse Creuse, you start a team with nobody to play. Did
Yeah.
it ever occur to you that there's no opponents?
Yeah.
He never blinked. It never occurred to him. He figured out a way to go around it. And I think when you have a blind ambition to want to get somewhere,
Yeah.
you just put your head down and go.
You really do. You know that people are playing in the state somewhere,
Right.
and so you put this team together. You start making phone calls. Back in the day, they had a pretty good youth program, but the youth scheduling would be show up for a meeting, and you'd all come together in this gymnasium, and you'd go person to person to person to person to person to person, put your schedule together. And so that's what I found out about that meeting. Went there and put together. I think we had a 6-game schedule our very first year.
How'd you do?
You know what? We did well. I think we were like 3-3. We had enough kids, that had played in our clinics. We had enough kids who were athletic. We had enough kids who could pay attention to coaching. And Charlie and I had played before, so it wasn't like dads that were just learning the game.
Right.
We could put them into an offense, put them in defense, play man up, play man down. We had a goalie, that was amazing. We actually had a goalie. So yeah, we did pretty well, 3-3.
If I'm watching this and you're starting a program,
Yeah.
what do you start with from a skill level when you have nobody that really understands the game? What did you guys start with? That's an important point, because where do you start the ball rolling?
Yeah. So when you talk about from a skill level, you're talking about the skills of the skills
You got
of the
60
game.
kids and nobody knows how to catch your pass. Where do you start?
Well, that's what you start with, right? Actually, you start with ground balls.
Right.
You start with, okay, but before you can even catch and throw a ball, you got to get in your stick, right? And so when your first clinic and stuff, the kids are grabbing the ball and putting it in their stick, and so you start with ground balls, and then as you know, whether you're in college or professional, it all starts with ground balls.
Right. I think it's interesting now. We're teaching a lot of new young players. I'm using women's sticks on the boys' side
Good idea.
to learn to catch and pass, which is something that a couple years ago at the convention, somebody had mentioned that was a process.
Yeah.
I'm now warming up my goalies with women's sticks
Yeah.
early part of the season, because it's that being able to have hands and being a little softer.
Right.
And we don't really teach kids now to catch behind the ear. We're teaching them to catch out front, and then we bring it back.
Yeah.
So it's not that setup kind of thing. And with these, and I got 4 or 5. I coached a girls team for a long time at Michigan State, so I've got a bunch of girl sticks.
Right.
Guys hate them until they go through 5-10 minutes. And they do it for a week. Then you put the bucket back in their hand, their stick, and it's like, oh my God, because all of a sudden you've softened their hands.
Well, that's where the tennis ball comes in. I think back in the day we used tennis balls with kids, because that thing just bounces out of your stick pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Back in the day when I was playing, the stick didn't have the pocket it has, right? So you had to give with your hands. You had to cradle right away. So we used tennis balls so that it would really fly, bounce off the stick. But yeah, I never thought about using a girl stick.
I think internet is the best and worst for lacrosse, because you know, you see these kids, especially you'll see travel kids, looking like they're spastic with their hands.
Right.
And you explain them every time you move. You know, you have this discussion.
Right.
And so you got to bring them back from the summer and sort of de-risk them.
Right.
Because it's all this, you know, Mikey Powell behind the back, which is fine.
Right.
But it's I don't know. I think it's way too much carnival stuff.
Well, you know, the game has always been about efficiency. Any sport you play is about efficiency, right? And the less movement that you can do, that's erratic, the better you're going to be at the game. Probably the best thing about videos though is, you know, a lot of kids watch those things, and you know, we had kids who were face-off guys, and I wasn't a face-off guy. I was a defenseman in college, right? And so was Charlie. This guy watched video after video after video after video and did training. He made himself a face-off guy. Went to Michigan on a scholarship, you know, and just by watching videos. So that is
Well,
a
there's
beauty.
some talent involved there too.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. There's some
Yeah,
talent involved, but
there's more than just watching videos.
there's a lot. But well,
Sure.
there's talent, God-given talent, but he took the initiative to look and learn, which is what most of the best lacrosse players do anyhow.
All right, well, we take a kind of right-hand turn, but so we're now 3-3. Got a middle school program.
Middle school program.
What's the obvious next step? And I say it two ways. What's the next step? And then knowing you're from Brighton, and Brighton is very successful athletically across the board.
Yeah.
John Thompson's built a great great family here with,
Yep.
with everything that they do. That helps a little bit. If
Yep.
there's some place where it isn't as successful. Where do you go from the middle school program?
Okay, so you know, you start a middle school program, and you know, you play a few games, and you realize, you know, 17 of these kids are going to high school next year, and you go, well, you just can't stop, right? And you realize, okay, I just got myself on this treadmill, I just can't stop. So I went to John Thompson and said, hey, John, you know, how do we like set up a lacrosse club, program, whatever you want to call it. I'll provide all the funding, I'll provide all the coaches, I'll provide all the players, I'll provide everything. I just need your anointing to be able to go ahead and do this. And of course, John was very open to that. You know, we could bring a new sport in. The cost for him was nothing.
And this was prior to the MHSA taking over. This was the MSLA days when it was a club programs across the state.
So you'll tell me the date.
2004 is the first year that they came in. So
Okay, so this was 2000. This was 2000, and this was 2004 is when we had our very first high school team, right? Okay. And so we were a club in the high school vernacular of club. We were on that side of the ledger. The next year we were on the varsity side of the ledger, John's side of the ledger. And at that point in time, we still did the same thing for John.
Right.
We provide the coaches, we provide everything that we needed to provide. So he was able to have a new sport,
right.
and we were committed to providing whatever support needed to be done to have the sport. But you know, your first year, you got 17 freshmen. I think we had 4 sophomores, 2 juniors, and a senior. Young guys just want to come out and play the game for the first time, and we played Grand Blanc for our very first game. You know, you go out there, you got, you know, 4'10" kids against these 6' men. It was just like, you know, just don't hurt them. Just don't hurt them.
Prior to the state taking over, that's why you had 3 divisions. You had 1, 2, and 4.
That's right.
The interesting part is I never understood why we never had 3. We had Division 4 with most of the teams.
That was brand new teams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was interesting in those days is that 1 had traditional teams, the Bryces and CCs.
Yep.
2 was maybe the Waterfords and maybe the L'Anse Cruzes. There was no 3, and then there was 4. And 4 had, at that time, probably 70 teams.
Yep, all new though.
So there were 12, well, some, when you say new, 0 to 3 years, let's say.
Yeah.
When you had the MSLA board, we used to have these arguments. The MLSA board was represented by everybody in Division 1 and 2, and nobody had any representation from Division 4.
Oh.
So I made an argument one day to somebody that said, you've got 70 teams in Division 4, 18 teams in Division 1 and 2,
Yeah.
and no representation whether was that process. Well, you're not strong enough yet as an organization. Well, it turned out that fortunately the state took over and kind of leveled the playing field.
Yeah. So I wasn't aware of that history, so that's great history
Yeah.
for me to learn today.
Well, then it's funny because we're talking right now at the Lacrosse Coaches Association about how we handle all state stuff.
Right.
The same arguments made by the same people, sort of in their Republican and Democratic worlds, 20 years later are standing in the same places. Completely different arguments, but it's the same stances.
Wow.
It's funny because they stand where they stand and they have their opinions, and it's except for the actual arguments, we're talking about things differently now. I'm arguing over, I'm the liberal and they're sort of the conservative. It's remarkable. 20 years later, the same guys are arguing their same positions, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
because you're trying to move the sport forward, and from that perspective.
Yep.
So you've got this team, and obviously your first year was successful.
The first year wasn't bad. When we played against high schools, if you had a JV team, we played them. If all you had was a varsity team, we played them, and we won a majority, if not all, of our JV games, and got our butts whacked against any varsity team where they had older guys to play against. But it was successful enough to where you could see some potential there.
Yeah.
And the key component about that was so we had the first year high school program, and then we had the youth program, and that year we went from having one team, 7th, 8th grade team, to having two, a 7th grade team and an 8th grade team. And then
So it was growing.
it was growing so you got to kind of grow both pieces, right? You just can't have all of it. You got to kind of grow both pieces. So in year 2 we had a JV and varsity team, and then we had a 7th and 8th grade team, and then year 3 we did the same thing. I think we had year 3 we had a varsity team, a JV team, a freshman team, 8th grade team, and a 7th grade team, and that was the year that we divided things up by age group so that they stayed with each other all the way through classes. So our JV team was really sophomores, freshman team was really freshmen, 8th grade, 7th grade. And that was a year that we realized we had so many kids coming from other communities that we had to really, just focus on Brighton. Because our objective from the very get-go, once we brought those kids into high school, our whole program was geared towards making sure Brighton had a successful varsity high school program.
Right.
That was the objective, right? It wasn't the objective to have a successful youth program, but to have a successful varsity program. So in that year, I think it was year 4 of existence, we had a bunch of kids from Heartland, and we said, we need to send your kids back, and we just can't do it with you. And boy, they were, and we said, we'll help you start your own program. But it was a good thing to happen for Brighton. They were not happy with us, and they went on in anger or whatever, and started a very successful program over there at Heartland as well. But again, it came back to the concept of trying to build our community, build our tribe, as used to be,
Right.
build our community, and with the objective of making sure that our whole program is geared towards having a successful high school program.
Well, I don't think that makes sense from that standpoint. Talk about the difference between managing an 8th grade program and managing a high school program. Or are they the same?
So in my role, I was doing both. So I was managing the program. I had the high school, and Charlie was doing the youth, but I had the overall arching part of it. The youth program was a little bit easier, right? The expectation of the youth program was different, right? It was all about love and learn. Love the game, learn the game, have fun. Love the game, learn the game, have fun. Bring kids in from other sports to introduce them to the game so you could build enough pool of kids, and it was a lot different thing. There was an expectation at the high school level that you would win, but you didn't want to lose the fact that your main objective was to have a impact on these young people's lives. So that was a little bit different. I was lucky. The expectations of parents back then was completely different. I didn't have any lacrosse dads, football dads, maybe baseball dads, but they all knew they didn't know how to play the game. So I didn't have any crowd from that. I had great support from John Thompson, and we were able to recruit kids, like as you earlier mentioned, from all over Brighton. I used to go to the parking lot, invite kids to come to practice, check it out.
How many kids just showed up because all of a sudden they saw something that they'd never seen before? That happens a lot. You have a practice, and all of a sudden here comes a dad and his son. What is this sport? Especially 15 years ago.
What would happen mostly is a guy would bring a friend. It would not necessarily, at the high school level. That might have happened at the youth level, but at the high school level, a guy would say, "This is my friend Joe. He wants to play," and I'd grab a stick and an old helmet, and throw it on him, and let him go out there. And we had open enrollment for our lacrosse program the first 3 years at any level for anybody. Just we want to get kids to play the game. The oldest one now is year 3 of the high school program is now a junior. The middle one is a freshman, and we go into his senior year now. The senior year with these kids, 2007, and Eli is now playing varsity with him. Our kids have gone through this transition. Their junior year, I gave them too hard of a schedule. They got their butts kicked again. And then they go into their senior year having played ball together for 5 years now, being smallest kids out there to being men, playing lacrosse, and it just changed everything, right? The confidence they had, their abilities they had, the way they played together, they moved together. I think we were ranked at the end of the year, ranked number 15 in the state, which wasn't great because there's only 60 teams, but ranked number 15, and that was the impetus. Once you had a successful high school program, you had more and more kids that wanted to participate. So your youth program, where we used to have just 7th and 8th, was now 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th, freshman, JV, and varsity. And once we had that tail put together, that was the starting point to kind of keep things going.
Now I know from experience, you used to have meetings with your coaches from varsity down to 5th grade.
We did.
As a sort of a management tool.
Correct. Well,
explain why, because that's kind of unusual.
Well, okay, so one of the toughest things to do as a running a lacrosse program is finding coaches, right? Because you can't have all dads who never played before, but you need their help, right?
Absolutely.
So early along, you need that. But I also knew that if we could develop coaches through our players and then bring them back later, we would have a pretty successful situation. But I also knew that, in order for you to build a community program, you had to feel a part of the community, right? So the coach had to feel a part of the community too. So you bring a 5th and 6th grade coach together with the varsity coach, and they're having conversations about lacrosse. That's kind of a big deal. And whatever you're communicating with the high school coaches should be communicated with the youth coaches. And so now what you've done is you're enabling the ability for communication of how you're going to run your program to be communicated at all levels. What's important at one level is moved down every other level, and the guys are teaching at the youngest level are learning from those who have the most experience. Plus, the other thing I'll say is that sense of fraternity amongst those guys, and that was a part that was hugely important. You have to build a culture in your program. You have to build a culture for your kids. You got to build a culture for your coaches, and if you can build that culture, that's how you get people to really buy into your program.
Are you a believer in 2 sports, more than 1 sport?
I'm a believer in a kid playing as many sports as he possibly can.
Okay.
I grew up in the era when you only had certain sports to play, and you could only play them certain times of the year. And I grew up I work out now, and I cross train now because as you get older, your muscles have to be doing multiple things. And we relied upon that. If we didn't have hockey players to come play lacrosse, football players, soccer players, I wouldn't have a lacrosse program.
Well, and I asked the question because a couple of reasons. Athletic directors now are stretched thin with the amount of programs that they run, and all, high schools now have 30, 35, 40 programs in some cases. You've got travel teams pulling kids in all kinds of directions because travel teams want to replace high school teams. That certainly is true in soccer. And my point to it is that, these kids now have a travel coach that will tell them, just play lacrosse. That's all you need to do because it's a financial aspect, right? And if you're building this culture that is really great for lacrosse, that's wonderful. But it's also, what do you do within that culture to make sure that kid is more involved than just lacrosse?
Well, so
maybe the culture in the football program isn't as good. Not here, but other places. So you're building culture, but part of that is being able to work with other programs within the school.
Yeah, but so back in the day, we used to tell kids, parents would come and ask us, what you do in the off season? I said, well, in the fall, Brighton they have soccer, they have football, they have cross country. Have him do the cross country team. He'll get his lungs in shape. We would look back, and this is what our coaches did when we were growing up. You would do other sports in order to prepare yourself for a sport because there wasn't this sense of one sport. I mean, my children played travel soccer for a long period of time. They played more soccer by the time they got to high school. Right. By the time they got to high school, they played so much soccer that they were almost tired of playing soccer. Whereas when I was growing up, you would go out and play games by yourself. I had a time with my youth program where I said, okay, Thursday, school's out, I got to go to work, but why don't you guys go play a game of pickup over at the field? Go over there about 4 o'clock and play pickup for an hour and then just head home. So I show up at the field around 5 o'clock. There's kids on the grass, doing the backstroke and picking the daisies. I go, what are you guys doing? We're waiting for you. I go, what for? So we can play pickup. Yeah. They didn't even know what that was. But once they learn, once you kind of get them out of the structure and allow them to create, it's pretty cool.
The term sandlot used for baseball is exactly what's starting to filter into lacrosse.
Yeah.
In Ann Arbor, I coach at Skyline, and to get more kids involved, which is the point, I put buckets out, right? And so we started every Monday night, you could go just play 3-on-3, 2-on-2 with just a tennis ball and 2 sticks, right? So we had 4 kids show up the first Monday. We had 4 kids show up the second Monday. And a couple of those kids said to some other ones, and then 8 showed up. AD calls me about 4 weeks later. He says, you got this big thing of buckets out by your net, yeah? He said, well, you better come over here right now. And I said, well, I live 50 miles away. Well, let me put you on FaceTime. And there was 40 kids out there. And they'd all divided up and they'd take the buckets, and the problem he was going is they couldn't find enough tennis balls.
Right.
Because they ran out of tennis balls.
Right.
Well, can you open the door and the tennis balls inside, and away they went. We now have about 40 to 50 kids every week on Monday and Wednesday. In the off season when the weather's crappy and everybody's gone home, they go play bucket ball. And there's no supervision, and they also know one thing. If anything comes back to me through the athletic director unrelated to lacrosse, we're done playing bucket ball. But now they're shooting between their legs. They're doing stuff behind their backs. They're bouncing passes. They're doing things that I would never let them do in practice. But they get better at the skill stuff.
Right.
And it's the way we grew up. And if we don't get back to that sandlap process, everything we do is supervised. At some point, you got to have.
Well, every great athlete that you read about, even if we read about people like Tiger Woods and and the things of this nature of supervision that he had, the passion these guys have for whatever game they're playing. Michael Jordan didn't have to have his dad have him shoot basketball. He did it on his own.
Right.
You talk about these guys that played lacrosse. I've seen videos. Mikey Powell going down an alleyway in his neighborhood, throwing a ball against both sides of the wall, playing his version of wall ball. It's not what you do at practice that makes you a good lacrosse player. What makes a good lacrosse player is what he does after practice on his own, developing himself. Because you can't practice enough with everybody to give them what they want because they're hungry for the game.
I think it's semantics. We were thirsty as kids. Now we have to hydrate. It's a different word.
It is kind of interesting.
And I find it interesting with personal training, or for that matter, even physical therapy.
Yeah.
I'll say to the kid, why don't you jump rope 3 minutes a day? Just go buy a cheap jump rope, go in the basement when nobody's looking, and jump rope. I says, and do me this favor, go back to your professional trainer, your personal trainer, whatever it might be, and ask him what 3 minutes of jump rope is going to do versus the $50 you're paying for the 45 minutes you're getting for training. Ask him if there's any equivalent to that.
Right.
And about half the kids come back and go, it's almost equal. Well, now 3 minutes of jump rope is a lot harder than you think it is.
Oh, it's a lot harder.
But if
It's a lot harder.
if boxers are doing it and have done it for 75 years,
Yeah.
it's the cost of going in your basement with a jump rope
Right.
versus this. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't go to physical therapy or personal trainers. Two different things. But that jump rope has effect the same on both. And why we don't dumb it down a little bit, I think that's kind of where it's got to go backwards a little bit.
And I think that you asked a question about the coaches and why did you do that and trying to build a culture and stuff. And I think you have every program you have to have an objective, right? The objective was to have a successful high school program, and the other part of the objective was to have an impact on our community. And so if you're going to those two objectives, you have to impact people at the coaching level, at the parent level, at the kid level. We used to have this definition. We told the kids the definition of man was someone who rejects passivity, accepts responsibility, leads courageously, and seeks a greater reward. And we could teach lacrosse skill sets and concept off of that fact that reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and seek the greater reward. And that came out of the idea that the heritage of this game was to teach young men skill sets to become good warriors when this was the original sport in America.
Is that acronym from business or is it from sport?
That acronym comes from, I went to a Bible study one time with a bunch of guys.
So it's not sport, it's not athletic related.
No, not at all. It's just human nature related.
So the follow-up question to that is that you've spent a lot of your time in the business world.
Yeah.
I noticed in a couple of interviews that we've done, Adam Vincent in East Grand Rapids approached brand new guys, same thing, no background to speak of except for a year of club lacrosse. They approached it like a business in terms of the way they set things up.
Yeah.
East Grand Rapids has been highly successful.
Absolutely.
And I never really thought of it that way because we had been trained more athletically than business oriented.
Yeah.
And I think it's an avenue that if you're really smart as a coach, you're going to listen because there's some really good culture building.
Well, if you don't,
Process,
every good business, right? Every good business has a good CEO who has vision, right? And someone who, and a CEO with good vision knows what his skill sets are and what they're not. And then he hires people with skill sets he doesn't have.
Right.
And then at the same time, he's trying to build a culture of one that is respects people, makes people feel appreciated, makes people feel a part of something. And every good business does that, right? And so if that's good for business, every good family does that, as a matter of fact, too.
Drawing from your business background,
Yep.
you had 3 sons play for you in high school.
I actually only had 2 that actually played for me in high school.
Okay.
But the youngest one, by the time he got to high school, I'd fired myself, moved myself back to the youth program. I coached him 1 year, but I only coached him 1 year in 8th grade.
Well, before I ask the follow-up question,
Sure.
how do you fire yourself? That's just a matter of stepping down?
No, what you do is you go into your final year, and we played. We were like 11-3, and 2 of our losses came against Novi, and we had not beaten Novi every year we played against them. And there's a guy there by the name of Mhslca who'd been there all those years, he was looking at becoming the Novi head coach, and I said, well, let's entice him to come to Brighton, and if you can't beat him, hire him.
Right.
And so when I hired him, the idea was I can't stay on as a high school assistant coach because he has to be in charge of that.
Right.
So Charlie stayed on as assistant coach and at the varsity program. I went back to do the youth side of it. And yeah, like I said, if you're not going to find better people than yourself to run your organization, things you're not strong at, you're missing the boat.
From a managerial standpoint, which is kind of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
did you learn any rules about coaching your own sons?
I did, actually, and my rule, and as rule I even told my coaches when I did have father coaches, I specifically did not coach my kids. So when I was coaching varsity, I had an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. Now, we would do drills and stuff together. I'd be there when they were doing things, but when it came to telling them right or wrong or indifferent, Charlie was the offensive coordinator. I'd tell him, hey, look, you tell that Gustafson kid over there to get his poop together, or else. And so I would observe things, mention to him, and he would communicate with them. And the reason why I did that was it allowed me to be the head coach and not have to have other kids see me thinking I was doing anything with my own kids, number one. And number two was it allowed me not to be their dad and their coach at the same time. Because as their coach, you can tell them things that they're doing poorly and they take it differently. As your dad, when you tell them that, it's more emotional when they take those things. So I was able to still be dad without having to be, the coach. I think that's a difficult thing for some dads to actually coordinate.
I coached my son in 2 sports, skiing and in lacrosse,
Mhm.
and he was a 4-year varsity guy in both sports, all state in both. And only thing we did, we didn't talk about it at home because Dad was there every day.
Yep.
And the only other rule, and I had an assistant coach doing the same thing. Assistant coach handled him on the field.
Yep.
The only rule we had was on Fridays, he got a chance to, bitch about the coach at dinner, which, again, most of the time was an exercise in futility. But every once in a while, if you think, and one of the things we used to do, I always want my kids to tell me what they think, not what they want me to hear.
Yep.
And then once in a while, you get some young kids that maybe will go over the line because they don't quite understand the paradigm.
Right.
Some people say, well, he's kind of rude. I said, I can't, the old Cat Stevens song, I can't tell them to talk and then shut up when I don't like what they say.
Right.
You got to manage the process because you want their honest input.
Yeah, my children never had a problem giving me input, in a respectable way. But
Sure.
one of the real pluses of that, this is when they're high school, right, and sophomores or whatever. This is a struggling time for young men at that point in time, and to be able to be with them, 2 hours a day, every single day, and have conversations with them about a common topic that we spoke about as a common topic was rich. That was
Very small niche that you can interact with.
Yeah, but you had 2 hours a
Right.
day in a specific area that there was nothing could be offensive when when they might have felt that way. It was a very unique time for us.
Did you understand it at the time?
Um,
And the follow-up to that is, did they understand it better now?
So they understood it. They lived it at the time. But
Right.
you're right. They definitely understand it now, and it's impacted them the way that one of my sons, Eli, coaches here at Brighton High School.
You're his
And
assistant, am I correct?
I was his assistant for a year.
Go ahead and tell that story, and I'll follow up with my question.
Okay, so I quote unquote retired, and then the year after I retired, Eli asked me. He says, "Hey, I need some new assistant coaches for my JV team." And I said, "Fine, I'll reach out like always. I'll call some of the alumni and see if they want to come back and coach." He said, no, I want you to coach with me. I said, Eli, man, I just got done, you know. And he goes, I want you to come back. So I was his assistant coach. He made sure I carried the ball bag, made sure that I knew where the medical kit was. But it's a rich thing when you can watch your kid work, whether it be in a job or coaching. You have a chance to see him interact with the kids and what he says to them, how he communicates with them, the way they look at him, how he communicates with the parents, how he deals with other coaches. It's a rich experience to see your son or daughter work. And it was when I didn't want to do it, it was it was one of those things you do because you feel needed to do it, but it was an honor to be able to actually see that.
He's how old right now?
27.
Does he get the time you spend together is different than it was when he was playing for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. There's a picture of he and I. We're both on the field and we're pointing in the same direction. Both of us pointing in the same direction.
Thank God, right?
And well, the caption I sent out to friends was, "Can you imagine 5 years ago, Eli and I pointing in the same direction?" So yeah, it was wonderful for he and I.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I got in an argument with a referee at one point. My son helped coach me with me at St. Mary's, and I went like that. And the guy was coming towards me, and the picture was taken from the side.
Yep.
And I pointed past his head, but in the picture it looked like I could actually stuck my finger in his mouth.
Oh.
And my son's got this look in this picture. They ran it in the Oakland Press. He's got this look of gasp, like somehow I'm trying to reach down the guy's throat, pull his tongue. It was kind of on the side.
Oh yeah, classic.
But it was the right angle,
Classic.
and the photo still sits in his office. And every time I go to his office, I chuckle because I see the same picture.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of
No,
those.
it was a great privilege to be able to coach your own kids. But what was even more of a privilege was that the community trusted you to coach their kids. You know, and you know, after my kids left, you know, I stayed on for another 9 years, I think it was. You know, and so that's when it was became a really important piece when. Now you're impacting your community kids and have an impact on them. And we did some interesting things back in the day. You know, first of all, we had a summer camp every single year, and in order for you to be a coach of the summer camp, you had to be on the varsity team. So the varsity coaches would come back, and it'd be for all the youth kids, and they would help coach the kids. And again, the concept of teaching, how do you give back? During the season, the varsity team would come over to one 7th grade team, one 8th grade team, and a 5th and 6th grade team, and they'd come over from practice because we would play over at Limbaum. They come over from practice. You personally call a timeout. They'd come running across the field as the kids are in timeout, and they'd come around and they'd do a cheer like you would at the end of a break. And these kids would just look up at them, and they would want to go to their games to watch them play. And after a few years of doing this, the kids who were playing would now be the varsity kids. And I'd ask them, what's it feel like to come over here versus being here seeing that? And they said it was kind of like surreal. And again, it was giving people a chance to participate in helping build other people was kind of the mantra of what we tried to do.
Now, I've heard you mention that you were the only losing coach in Brighton's history.
Yeah, nice of you to bring that up. So our first 4 years, of course, you know, I was 2 games below 500, the only coach in Brighton's history to have a losing record.
I'm not saying it to look at a losing record. That wasn't my point. You're one of the first inductees to go in as a contributor to the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association Hall of Fame.
Which means I probably have the worst record of anybody in there. So
no, well, I don't know that that's true. We got several guys that are in the hall that have lots of victories, but they also have lots of losses. So being around longevity sometimes matters as much as just being successful. My point of the contribution is, we've had this conversation now for the better part of 45 minutes. Your passion and your commitment to your community is the reason that you're a member of the Hall of Fame, because of all of the work that you've done. And I think it's important to point that out, because you don't have to go 25-0 every year and win a state championship to have great effect on a community. And I think
I appreciate that.
From a Hall of Fame perspective,
I appreciate that.
I went in as a coach. I'd like to think I did the work, but we've kind of changed the model for the High School Coaches Association to recognize people, referees, who've been, stellar in their approach to the promise, to the approach of it. And I think that's a very recognizable point, because you've meant so much to your community.
Yeah.
And think of all the kids that you've touched in terms of along the way of all the things that are going to matter that you've had an impact on their life.
See,
That's
and that's
Hall of Fame worthy is really the
I
point.
appreciate that, and that's really the reward, right? The reward as a kid, is the wedding invitation that you get to come to someone's wedding. The reward is when you're at a store or at a place where you might buy a beverage, and the person that's serving you says, "I think you were my lacrosse coach," or when you have high school kids that that you see now that they reflect back when they were playing youth ball, or you can look back and you can see that we had one third team honorable mention lacrosse player, all-state lacrosse player in 2007, and now you look and you see you have 3 or 4 All-Americans, and you can see how you kind of start something, build something, provide some direction for something. Then you hand it over to your community, and they love and care for as much as you do, and they continue to do what they do with that program.
The stories that have come out from this series have been remarkable.
Yeah.
And the nuances. We were talking at one point, you and I were talking at one point, I said I used to take mouth guards and always have them on my backpack.
Yeah.
And I would take the mouth guards and I'd put them in lemon or I'd put them in vinegar and I'd put them back in the packet. And the kid would open the packet up and put it in his mouth, and he'd have that momentary cringe because there was still a little residue.
Yeah.
The kid would say, "Well, what's on that, Coach?" I said, "There's enough on there for you to remember next time you don't forget your mouth guard."
Yeah.
I'm not poisoning you. I'm just giving you a reminder. And I've had other coaches go, "Wow, that's kind of cool."
I used to with the kids, when I was doing the youth side, even when I was doing the high school side, I would teach a kid and show a kid what to put in his bag. John Wooden thing, right? You need to have these things in your bag. An extra butt for your stick, 2 mouth guards, both jerseys, everything you had to have in your bag. And then I'd have a meeting with the parents, specifically with the mothers, and say, "Look, your son was just told how to pack his bag. I'm not going to tell you what I told him, because what would happen? They would pack the bag. This is what I told him. If your son comes to a game and he doesn't have one of those items, he's not going to play."
Right.
Okay. So if your son misses a lacrosse game in 7th or 8th grade because he's not prepared, that's so much better than going to a meeting when he's an adult and not being prepared. But I did have mouthpieces. But I wasn't quite as kind as you were. I would find the ones that were on the ground that were dirty. I just kind of rinse them off and have them in my pocket, and I'd leave them there. I said, "Well, look, I got some mouth guards if you want to have one of those if you've forgotten one." But I think that was a good teaching moment that, and believe me, I had parents who would come to me when the kid wasn't going to play and be very angry that the kid wasn't going to play, and I said, "Look, I just saved you a ton of extra work because he's going to miss one lacrosse game because he wasn't prepared." And that's all it took. It took one lacrosse game for him not to be prepared. I lost a goalie. I had a great goalie. He ended up being an all-state goalie when he was a young kid. He forgot to bring his mouthpiece, and we played with a less successful goalie in that game, and we got our butts kicked, but he never forgot again.
You mentioned John Wooden. Bill Walton has a great story in his book that basically says this: when they came back as seniors, it was maybe the best basketball team ever assembled.
Right.
They'd won 70 some odd games straight.
Right.
And the same discussion the first day is the tables, and in front of you was your shoes and your socks and your jock and all the things. And coach is going through, this is how you put your jock on and your shorts, and this is how you lace your shoes.
Put your socks on. Remember that.
And one of the guys on the team, I think it was Dave Meyer. Dave Meyer said, "Coach, I'm 22-year-old senior representing one of the best teams in the country. I know how to." And so it never dawned on Dave Meyer until he and Bill Walton were at the funeral of John Wooden.
Yeah.
And it was about the turning of the rock. It was turning over you leave nothing unturned.
Right.
He says he was 35 years old before he realized that some small exercise like that mattered.
It does matter.
And it does build culture.
The other thing too, that the same guy, same situation with Wooden, came back for his senior year. Wooden had a rule about haircuts. It had to be a certain length, and he said, "Look," and beards. And he said, "Look, Coach, I think I'm gonna keep my beard." And he goes, "Well, we don't allow beards on the team." He goes, "Well, I thought but I'd like to be able to keep it." And Wooden says to him, "This is John Wooden talking to Bill Walton. Do you want to tell your teammates? You want me to tell my teammates not playing this year?" That's commitment. That's commitment to a culture. That's commitment to something more than the individual. And I think we've lost that in our culture today, when it's all about the team, the culture, and what you're trying to accomplish, not about one person's personal need.
Well, there's one more Bill Walton story that I've got to tell. It's about Wooden. Their junior year.
Yep.
The first practice, they go into Pauley. He lived across the street from Pauley Pavilion. Turns out that he wasn't very happy with the morning practice. They have an afternoon practice. Halfway through the afternoon, he blows the whistle and says, "Go home." "What's the deal?" "Well, you guys don't seem to want to be here. Not a problem." puts a sign up on the door, practice is closed. They leave, come back the next day, there's a sign up on the door. We don't have practice in the morning. They come back in the afternoon, same sign's up. Now they're a little bit worried. Coach and his wife are sitting on the porch reading the paper. Team goes across the street, says, Coach, what's going on? You guys seem disinterested in practice, and I don't want to waste your time. When you're ready to practice, you let me know.
Right.
They all leave, realizing, so they come back that evening. Coach, we're ready to go Wednesday morning. He never raised his voice. They came back understanding the lesson.
Right.
And the reality to it was that he never had to make the point past that. Today,
Yeah.
I would think, and this is not an old guy talking, but today, if you gave the kids the day off, they just think it's a day off. They wouldn't know the difference that there was a lesson being planned.
Well, and again, the reason for that is the expectation he put on them about how they're supposed to act as men, right? So he gave them the expectation to begin with, and I don't think we spend enough time at all levels, having a bigger objective with your organization than to win. You have to have a bigger objective than to win. Winning a game is easy if you schedule correctly, right? Teaching young boys to become men is hard.
It's a very hard
And
job.
you have to teach them, that when it's easy, but yet when it's hard, it's hard. And we set kids up for success because we make it easy as opposed to making it hard. And when it's hard, they become hard and they become better.
If there's not necessarily a life lesson, but if there's a strand within you now that you're away from it,
Yeah.
that you sort of smile when you think about it to
Yeah.
yourself, well, what's that strand?
Every person you come in contact with is an opportunity for you to have an impact. And if you miss that opportunity, then you miss an opportunity to grow yourself and to grow them. And because you grow them, they might grow somebody else. They might grow somebody else. It's a very simple lesson I learned from a guy who grabbed 12 guys 2,000 years ago. And that guy and those 12 guys, they changed the world. And it's no different than what we do in lacrosse.
Good. Well, we appreciate your time, and certainly congratulations. The conversation has been terrific. We've been talking with Gregg Gustafson, who is a member of the class of 2018, Michigan High School Athletic Association Lacrosse Hall of Fame. So
Thanks,
Greg,
man.
thanks for your
It's good.
time.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.